following conversation with God was one I had after I watched a video on YouTube about climate change. And the guest on this climate chat, you can look up the channel, was Leon Simmons. And I knew who he was because he's somebody I follow on Twitter, although I'm not on Twitter a lot. Occasionally, when I want to see what's going on, if there's any news, I'll go on there and see if any of the climate change experts have anything to say. And the reason how I got interested in all of this was, I mean, I always knew that climate change was going to happen, that the world could not continue the way it was, ever since college, which was in the 70s, early 70s. We all were aware of that. And you could pretend you weren't, but you were. Uh, and so that it was coming. It just had to be. I mean, the world was overpopulated, and the way that we were trashing everything was pretty obvious. But what do you do? You think you're only one person. And then last year, about this time last year, I'm not sure when, around May, or earlier or later, I don't know. But somebody from heaven, I believe it was Steve, came to me and said, "Hey, Steph, the train has gone off the tracks. You need to be aware that it's here." The climate change issue is on the table. And so I went to research it because I always research everything I'm told. I'm just that way. And so I went to research it, and by golly, it was like at that moment everything was exploding. People were going crazy about how low the Antarctic sea ice was, and how the seas were warming at an exponential, or a very, very, well, I guess it was kind of exponential. Well, I don't know if it was exponential, but at a high rate. I'm not too sure what exponential means, but at a high rate. And I guess exponential must have something to do with exponents. I'm not, uh, don't know that much about statistics, so all I can do is say that everybody was going crazy. All the people who keep track of these things were going crazy. And so I began to pay attention. And since then, it's been a regular topic of discussion with those Heavenside uh, through the months, and lately with God. And so I went to God today and I said, "Look, I just listened to this video with Leon Simmons talking about, what he talks about is the sulfur emissions that have been reduced due to some regulations to not continue to pollute the atmosphere. But what it did was it reduced the aerosols in the atmosphere, which had some effect on rebuffing uh, solar radiation, and then the CO2 and the greenhouse gases apparently trap solar radiation in the earth. The solar radiation can come through them, it can't get out. The effect of the aerosols is lower, so the aerosols had kind of a masking effect on the rate of increase of heating of the planet and the oceans. And I can't tell you all about it because I'm not an expert. That's sort of my lay person's attribution, from Leon Simmons. And I asked God about it, and here's what God had to say about it. So you can look up, I will leave a link down below to the discussion with Leon Simmons. And these are very important things. These are very important things. And he's got the data. But as you can listen to God, you can see that God has a little bit different point of view on some of this. And you can decide for yourself what you want to trust upon, what you want to hold close to your chest, what you want to discard, etc. Is there anything you could add, please? And I should say good afternoon first, but is there anything, since it's afternoon, it's one, is there anything you can add to the story of, or in reflection of what Leon Simmons is saying? Simmons is the leading expert on the North Atlantic trade routes, and he is not a daily trust on what is happening under the sea. So he is not aware of the cacophony that is about to burst out upon the earth. He is looking at the data that's available to him, and that data is indicating to him that there is a lessening of the effect of radiation rebuttal, you might say, from the sun due to aerosols. But this is not the case. This is not the underlying cause of the warming oceans. It is the very, very complex relationship of the core of the earth with the crust that is affected, you see. It is very, very chaotic at this moment because the inner core and the outer crust have a relationship that is dependent upon each molecule that constitutes the interpretation of their reality in a balanced way so that they don't grate on each other, you might say, in a way that does not maintain their harmony. The imbalance between the core and the crust is so disturbed that there is a ripple of energy that is escaping from the traditional combination that they present as a team, you might say. They work together as a team because God, in His great mercy, established a way for the planets to play in a continually developing way so that they would eventually form a crust that would be stable enough for the vegetation and animals that would grow upon it. However, the disruptions in the undersea crust are only the beginning of the problem, you see. They're only the beginning. And so what Simmons is saying is that there is a seeming influence of the aerosols upon the warming trajectory of the earth. And this is not the explanation for the coming generation, because the coming generation will come to see that there is a lot more going on under the sea than people can see today. And that is the problem. That is going to cause the changes coming to the earth. People cannot seem to comprehend that it's not just what you're putting in the air. It is also what you took from the earth. It is not just chopping down the trees. It is all the deep mining and the disturbance of the balance between the earth core and the crust, you see. And this disturbance has continued to be ignored. It's continued to be ignored as if it had no significance because people don't want to trust on the possibility that God managed to create the planet on which they exist through a careful balancing of all the energies, including the molten core and the cool crust, you see. And so they continue to believe that there is a way to relieve their conscience about what they have done to the earth, you see. That somehow they can just stop all the emissions and get things back in balance, which is foolishness, of course. It's absolutely insane. And he at least recognizes the insanity of the situation. So he has a very important voice in what is happening today, and it's worth listening to him. However, it's also worth understanding that there is a deep unbalance under the sea that you can't see. It's not just an imbalance in the amount of radiation that is being absorbed and reflected back into the depths of space, you might say. It is also about the depths of the core of the problem, you see. The core of the problem is that humanity has trusted on destroying their own planet because they would say, we don't have to worry about our children today. We'll just take what we need and more than we need. Whatever we can take and make money from, we'll do that. And they started pulling the resources out of the earth without regard to the effect it would have. God, I have to say this. This makes me think about something that I saw years ago when I heard about all the mining and stuff going on and the deep, deep drilling and stuff. And I was thinking, as we're taking all the oil out of the earth, basically, and leaving none for future generations and all the other resources, that it's like pulling things out of the earth and the earth begins to shrink like a balloon, you know, uh, because everything was in balance. And like an orange, if you suck the juice out of it, it begins to cave in and shrivel. So, uh, so anyway, that's what this reminds me of, although I had that thought years and years and years ago. And it's always interesting to me how the synchronicity between these thoughts that I have and what occurs over time. And so I'm wondering if it's the very simplicity. I mean, it doesn't matter where it came from. If it came from you, that thought, or whatever. But it's the very simplicity of the thought that strikes me right now. That, like sucking the juice out of the orange, you know, and then expecting the orange to be the same and to, remain the same on its on the crust, you might say, on the outside. And of course, people would laugh at what I said, and I even thought of making it into a cartoon. But people would laugh at what I said because they don't think that way. This is true, dear. They do not think that way because if they had to think that way, they would have to question their own hatred, you see. They would have to question the fact that they hate their own children so much that they would destroy their habitat. And they don't want to think that way. And so, even today, although they only play in a very limited way by discussing the imbalance in the energy from the sun, you see, and its relationship with the earth, they don't think about the sun inside the earth, you see. They don't think that there can be anything going on there. But there's a lot going on there, and a few are understanding that today when they say that the rotation of the earth is changing in a minute way, they would say, but it could signify something more important today. And so they say, maybe we should pay attention to this. Maybe we should pay attention to this. And there are a few oceanographers who are concerned about the heating of the oceans. And they're saying, there's got to be something else at play. There's got to be something else at play. It cannot be explained by the trapping of sunlight. It's not enough. It's not enough. There's something else at play here. And they need to understand that you exist on a narrow band of energy between the sun under your feet and the sun in the sky. And if they don't understand this, it is because they don't trust on God, you see. They don't trust on me. They don't trust on reality. They trust on the fantasy world where they were generated spontaneously at birth into the world that just happened to be spontaneously generated before them, you see. And everything is spontaneously generated and nothing's connected to anything else. The fact that every person is spontaneously generated has no connection to anything in their world because that's the nature of spontaneous generation, you see, that it is for those who turn their back on me. They are spontaneously choosing to generate a fantasy world in order to resolve their anxiety.